Welcome to The Potential, where we talk about topics that early career designers care about. Today, we're going to be talking about getting laid off during a recession and what you can do about it. So, preparing for the recession, were there signals that you saw before you got laid off?
So I didn't realize it at the time, but in retrospect, there absolutely were. So first, I worked at a small startup, and all of a sudden, like we used to talk a lot about the financials and the sales, and then things kind of went quiet, and we weren't talking about it as much anymore. I should have looked out for that. We had talked a bunch about investor capital that was coming in, and then all of a sudden, we stopped talking about that. And then, um, meetings that used to be happening regularly just suddenly stopped happening. So I didn't know to look out for those things. There were pretty subtle changes. In my head, I was like, oh, we're just postponing these meetings, or there must not be any updates about the financials, so we'll talk about it soon. But actually, I should have been looking out for those things. How about you? You worked at a much bigger company. What signals could you have looked out for?
I think it was the macroeconomic signals for me, because I got laid off in 2009. I think the recession started happening in 2008. So just the world around me was already changing. So there was already layoffs happening at other companies. There was the housing crisis. So people were foreclosing on their homes. So just the incoming money for the entire industry was going away. And for me, the group that I was in is called the Advanced Planning and Strategy Group. So we were thinking about cars 5 to 20 years into the future, and they're worried about next quarter. So for me, looking back, it makes a lot of business is pretty logical. And so I think the logical sense for a group that they should cut is one, thinking about the future, because who knows if they're going to be around 5 to 20 years from now. And then so I guess in retrospect, it's not a surprise that that team got cut. And eventually I want to say a year later, that whole team got pretty much cut. So I was in the first round, and then the rest of the team was in the second round. So that's a signal, I think, to keep in mind. And I think with the things happening today too, there's a lot of layoffs happening. So I think those are signals that if it's not happening in your company, it might be a signal to keep an eye on.
So I think those are such great points. I'm curious, how do you keep from being paranoid? Because if we think about the macroeconomics of it, should we all be worried about our jobs right now? Like, how do we think about the reality of what might happen without getting super, super worried about what might happen?
That's a great point. I think, am I a negative person to say that? Yes, we should be scared. I think right now in this time around, it's the specific industries. So the tech industry, there's a lot of layoffs happening. Whereas if you work for oil and gas, maybe you don't have to worry so much, something like that. But there's definitely signals. Are there some signals that you're seeing right now that you think we should be watching out for?
I mean, so I would say for me, I don't want to be anxious about it all the time. So I look for also signals of when things are going to be okay. And signals of when things are going to be okay are how transparent is the decision making at the company that you're at? Are people telling you one thing and then something else happens? Because if that's happening, then don't trust anyone. Like, you might get laid off. But if people share information with you and then generally those things actually happen, I feel like you can kind of trust the leadership around you to tell you the truth. So I think that's one signal that I look for, is that kind of transparency and trust. And then the other one that I look for is if I ask a point blank question, like, hey, what is our plan for weathering the recession? Are there going to be layoffs, or how are we thinking about this financially? I actually try to answer that question. I look for, materials, presentations, talks. I look for people who can answer that question, because how people answer that question and how willing they are to answer that question also says a lot about whether you're actually at risk of being laid off or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I love what you said about trust and transparency too, because that just reminded me when I was interning in 2000, yeah, like the dot-com bust era. I was interning, and then I was working in a place called Ballet Design, and the owner, Frank Garrity, like the company wasn't generating a lot of money because of the clients dried up. And he basically told the company like, hey, this is the state that we're in terms of revenue for the company. I think it was maybe like 10, 15 people at the agency. And he gave the choice to people that, hey, we could have layoffs, or we could all take a pay cut together and ride this out. And hopefully, like, it wasn't zero clients, so we could try to ride this out. And the agency chose to all take a pay cut. And huge respect to Frank. He didn't pay himself, and the director of the company didn't pay himself either. And so to help write it out. And I don't know what happened later on, but during that time there were no layoffs because of that transparency. And I think everybody at the company trusted him. So I think what you're describing there is it's definitely a signal when the company says like, this is happening, and for him to do that, I thought was pretty amazing.
Yeah, talk about transparency and trust. That's incredible. Okay, so let's say the worst has happened. You got laid off during a recession. Happened to both of us, obviously. What was it like for you looking for jobs? It's so much rejection. Looking for jobs in a good market is hard. How did you keep yourself going through all of that rejection?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, there's some requirements when you're getting unemployment that you have to log your jobs that you're applying to. And so I had an Excel sheet with all of the jobs, the when I applied. And I think being able to track that helped a lot on who I'm applying to, who do I need to follow up with, was it a rejection, is there a potential? And on the spreadsheet, I just logged every single thing. And
Spreadsheets are always the answer, is what I'm hearing.
spreadsheets organize everything. How about you? How about you? What did you do?
Okay, so I'm very rejection sensitive. And anytime I've been looking for jobs, it's been really hard for me to kind of keep going. Like every setback feels bigger than it actually is. So I had to kind of learn, I think starting with when I got laid off during the recession, I've been working really hard on sort of thickening my skin, just being like, hey, it's just one rejection. It's not a reflection on me. It's just like one thing, and I'll try the next one. So I had to do a lot of just, I had to get my mental game right, of just figuring out how to navigate this. But the other one was I would always have the next job I was interested in lined up before I applied for one. So it would sort of just be like, okay, I'm going to apply for one, and then I have another one kind of in the pipeline that I'm going to apply for next. And at any given point in time, I was like always rolling toward the next job that I was going to apply for, so that if at any point in time I got bad news or I never heard back or I was waiting, it was always I had one more to look forward to. So I spent a lot of time just looking for the opportunities, which was super hard because there weren't that many jobs available. But I would just kind of sequence it in a way where I always had something to look forward to. And I think that helped me a lot. So similar to your spreadsheet, just a little less organized at the time.
Do you think there's a systematic way to thicken that skin?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's complicated. I think it depends on where. I mean, not to get, super therapy about this, but like see a therapist. Is maybe the short answer. I feel like it takes a lot of work to figure out why it's hard for you, what about it feels like a setback, like how it sets you up emotionally, if there are ways that you can, be nice to yourself or, support yourself in different ways. I think I'm not answering this very well, but I think the point is it's complicated, and I think it's different for different people. Did you have any struggle of just like feeling like, oh, the rejection is hard?
The way that I think, as you were explaining, I think the way that I get through it is that I don't get that upset about things I can't control. So the layoff, it's actually two uncontrolled things back to back, which is why it's stressful, and the unknown is a scary place. So the layoff, I didn't have any control over it. I didn't have any control over the decision on who's getting let go and who's not getting let go, because I just got let go, and that wasn't controlled by the director of the team. And then the next out of control thing is trying to get a job. Of you getting hired by somebody, of me getting hired by somebody, that's also out of my control. I can try to do things to sway it one or the other, like having a good portfolio, having a good interview, applying to these places, let them know that I'm looking. And there's all these things I can do. But ultimately, getting hired is out of my control. So getting laid off is out of my control, and getting hired is out of my control. And then so for me, how I deal with the rejection or or any kind of emotional thing related to it, because I don't have control over these things, I just tell myself it's not my fault, which I think is accurate to some extent. Maybe like 10%, if I was just this phenomenal employee, maybe they would have kept me or something. But ultimately, it's out of my control. And then so I try not to blame myself. And if I don't get hired, I'm like, okay, wasn't a good fit. Maybe the next one will be a good fit.
Were you always good at that, or did you have to learn how to do that?
I think I did have to learn it. When did I learn it though? I'm trying to think back. So I think I learned it applying to internships, because I had this naive thought about, if they don't like me for who I am, I don't care. And it was this sort of punk rock attitude a little bit. So like I didn't wear a suit to the interviews. I wore skater pants. I had a mohawk to one interview. And it was just like, I'm not going to conform to your corporate agenda. And then so I think it's almost like not necessarily me rejecting them, but it was like, hey, this is who I am, accept me for who I am. And if you don't like it, then it's not a good fit. So it's a little bit of an extreme example, but I think going through that, I wouldn't do that now, but going through that experience, I think taught me that, hey, it just might not be a good fit. And I think what helped me realize it is like, even though I wasn't properly hired, some places hired me anyway, because it was a good fit, or they just thought it was interesting to hire this kid. But I think that's what I realized it.
Yeah, it's a great life lesson of just the fit matters a lot. I think I ultimately came to that as well when I would get rejected by jobs. I was like, okay, well, if they didn't see value in me, I wouldn't want to work there anyway, because I want to work in a place that thinks that I'm providing value, that thinks that I'm able to do something that's important for them. So I think I ended up coming to a similar place, but for me, the kind of like sting of rejection still hit me every time, but I would like talk myself out of it with like, well, it wasn't really a good fit. So I think the fit part of it, that's a really good framing for what you learned, and kind of like what I ended up learning as well.
One maybe tactical advice then is the things that you can control. So things like, if I want to communicate that I'm a really strong visual designer in my portfolio, or in my case, I wanted to show that I'm a strong design researcher in my portfolio. Those are things that I can control, because if I go to an interview and I present myself and they don't see what you were just talking about with value, if they don't see the value that I am a strong design researcher, then I'm not doing a good job communicating. And that's something that I can control to change the way I'm talking, change my stories, change my portfolio, so that it comes off clearer that I am strong at design research. And then so I think those are things that I can control. Whether they choose that or not, I don't have control over, but whether I can control who I am and how to communicate that. And if they see that as a fit, then it's great. But it's my job for them to understand who I am, so that they can assess whether it is a fit or not. So with all of the rejections that you faced, how were you able to eventually find a job?
Yeah, I think it actually is building on what you were saying around what you can control. I didn't think of it that way at the time, but what I started doing with all of my free time was I started doing things that built my creative confidence. I got really into screen printing. I went to like this local studio that had open studio time, and I would just like come up with these designs and print them. And then I got really into photography, and I started doing a bunch of event photography and band photography. And I was getting like positive feedback for doing that. So I really just started to do these things that were really fun for me, but that also were just slowly building my creative confidence back up, so that when the time came where people finally started getting back to me, where I finally started to get interviews, I was able to show up and not feel like desperate or worried about rejection. I was able to show up and just be like, yeah, I have value. I'm good at what I do. And let's talk about whether I'm a good fit or not. So it really does, I'm realizing, go back to what you said about what you can control. And what I could control was doing what I loved and doing things that were creative. How about you? I feel like you did something similar. Like, how did you work up toward finding that job again?
Yeah, that the idea of creative confidence, I love that, because I think I did the same thing. So I went to the photographer nearby and asked if I could work there. I went to the video game conference to see if I can step foot into it, and met someone that hired me to do some contract work, or as a consultant. And I think working in that environment, I could see how I can apply design in different places, and also learning new things at the same time too. And I think for me, that learning gave me that creative confidence, and that, oh, wow, there's like all these new things I can learn and maybe potentially apply to other things. And knowing that I can continue to grow as a designer, even though I wasn't working in the design field, I think gave me a lot of confidence. And actually, that's probably one of the big things that I learned from being laid off, that that I can apply a bunch of things that I learned elsewhere into my work, and that gives me the the creative confidence to go seek out and learn new and interesting things that I can bring back.
That's such a good point. I mean, ultimately, the only way we can have long, healthy careers is to be open and willing to constantly learn new things, right? And so getting laid off during a recession, it kind of forced both of us to try new things and learn new things, because we didn't have a choice. We kind of just had to look around us and figure out what we wanted to focus on and just see what happened with it.
Was there anything that you did tactically that helped you find a job?
So I think the thing that ended up helping me the most was being being open to new opportunities. There was a long period of time where I was trying to like apply for a job and then try and get that job, or ask friends if they knew of job openings. I was just being really directed about what I was trying to do. But I ended up finding a job by just being open to talking to people. I happened to strike up a conversation with someone I sort of knew, and then she offered me a job on the spot. So that sense of like openness to what might be possible, it doesn't sound tactical, but it actually is a mindset that you can switch into. And that is something that I wish I had done more of with my time. I think I would have found more opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
I think,
You're an answer this question.
no, I don't think, hold on.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, can
How
you
about
say
you?
how?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you were describing, the opportunity, maybe it's related to timing. So for me, it was the timing was right. I talked to an agency that we had hired before, and at that time that I asked them if they had any openings, they just landed a really large client that they needed a lot of design strategic work related to design and research. And so they hired me then and there because they just needed somebody to help run that part. But that was all timing, because if I talked to them a month before, they would have said, no, we don't have anything. And so the idea of opportunity and keeping your mind open about the opportunity, I think with that opportunity, the mindset on how you're thinking about opportunity, I think lends you to more timing with a mindset of keeping your mind open to different opportunities. I think when that timing, the right timing strikes, you can hit it and get that job. Because if the timing's not right, you might be off a little bit. But when you're open to all these opportunities, you have a lot more chance of hitting the right timing.
That totally makes sense. Absolutely. And I really like the way we're kind of painting this picture. It's like, oh, yeah, the way that you get through a recession is you're open to learning. You are open to exploration and fun. And then you stay open to opportunities so that you can find that moment where the timing just like lines up perfectly for you. Because that's really what you need in a recession is the moment when timing lines up, because it's not like there are jobs everywhere. So super, like, I think just a great framework for thinking about how to get through a recession. What do you think? Did I miss anything that we talked about?
No, I think that's a fantastic way to end the segment, because that is a great summary of everything that I think I wish I would have told my younger self on how to approach it. Everyone, thank you so much for listening to our conversation today. If you liked what you heard and you learned some stuff, please subscribe or hit the like button.
And share it with your friends. We're trying to reach as many early career designers and help them as we possibly can. So tune in for our next topic soon.